Hi, and welcome to this tour of Flourish. Over the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to give you a demo of the tool, explain what it is, how it works, and how you can use it to create interactive visualizations, presentations, and other kinds of rich content. So Flourish is all cloud-based, so you just need a web browser to use it. There's no software to install. You just come to flourish.studio and hit the Get Started button. So we'll log in a moment, but before we do that, let's just quickly look at the examples page to just give a sense of the kinds of things that you can do with Flourish. Obviously, this is an incomplete list. So here's a bar chart race. This is quite a typical Flourish graphic in a way because it's a standard visualization type, but brought to life with animation, and it really guides you through the time series in this data to show how, in this case, the urban population changed over time. That idea of bringing simple visualization types to life is quite common in Flourish. So here's an example of a simple line chart, but this being Flourish, it can animate to a stacked area chart, or to a grid of charts, or to a bar chart. There are also much richer visualization types in Flourish. So just to give one example, here's an animated box plot. Here's a hierarchy plot where you can click to zoom in and focus on different aspects of the data, or change to a different view, such as a radial partition chart. Here is something a bit more Flourish specific. This is what we call the survey visualization. With this approach, every individual row in your data, every data point becomes a dot. It can then be sized, colored, and grouped to show different cuts of the data. So let's break these survey respondents out into men and women, say, or size them by their height or weight, or put them into a grid to show correlations between the different groups. We can even animate from a chart to a map. Speaking of maps, there are lots of mapping tools in Flourish too. So whether that's a map with a kind of base map where you can zoom in and out to show the whole world, or whether that is a standalone map, more like you might get on a news website, they're all there ready to use. And typically in Flourish, all the templates are designed to support this idea of storytelling. So rather than just creating a flat view, you can navigate around a map or a chart or a data explorer to explain with some narrative what's going on to your audience. Here's another example. This is what we call the connections globe, which draws bands between cities or regions on a world map to show how closely connected they are with trade or flows of data or whatever else. So before we log in and look at the editor, I just want to briefly give some background about the company. So Flourish is created by and grew out of Kiln, which is an award-winning visualization studio in London. Over the last 7 or 8 years, Kiln has worked with everyone from Google and The Guardian through to LSE and the World Health Organization to help them bring their data to life with interactive, rich storytelling. So the kind of projects we did there range from this map of every single recorded shipping position for the commercial fleet globally over the space of an entire year. That's streaming a gigabyte of data into the browser and visualizing it with an animation, through to this interactive diffusion cartogram map, which shows who caused climate change, who's exposed to climate change, and who doesn't have the economic resources to deal with climate change. So these projects, they were very varied, they were very fun to do, and they won a lot of awards. But ultimately, we found that this model of building everything from scratch for every individual project was too slow to enable us to make this available, this approach available to a very large number of organizations. And that's where Flourish came from, the desire to have this kind of rich interactive storytelling, but in a self-service way, without the need for an agency and without the need for coding. So how does it work? Well, at the core of Flourish is an ever-growing library of templates. And it's important to stress that in Flourish, a template isn't just a tweak to the colors and the layout or whatever. A template is an interactive module that can do whatever its creator wants. So a template could be anything from a particular kind of chart through to an interactive quiz. There's no limits on the design or functionality of a Flourish template. Once a template's in the system, then any user with access to that template can use it to put in their own data and text and to create a visualization, to create perhaps an animated story. You can then screen record those to make videos for social or use them full screen at big events, etc. But the other thing to understand about Flourish templates is that they can be extended by any developer. So many Flourish customers don't make use of this side of Flourish, but some see this as the real key to it. And that is that any JavaScript developer can use the Flourish SDK to make wholly new templates with, again, no limits on their functionality or design. So that means that as a enterprise customer, for example, you can augment the core templates with your own custom templates and set those to be private just to your company. The other benefit of having all these templates in Flourish is that in addition to using them with the online tool, it's also possible to access them via an API, and that allows you to integrate them into apps, dashboards, CMS systems, etc. And whichever way of using Flourish you choose, you can also set the whole thing up with your fonts and colors and branding. So as a business user, that means that your logo, your color palettes, your fonts will just automatically be applied whenever someone in your company creates a graphic. So let's log in and see how Flourish looks on the inside. I can click up here to sign in. Once I put in my details, I will arrive on my projects page, and this is just an index of all the projects in my account with tools for searching them, sorting them, filtering them, and so on. Up at the top, you can see two buttons for creating new projects, and that's because there are two different types of projects in Flourish. There are visualizations and there are stories. So a visualization is a template plus your data, plus your settings and customizations to create some kind of interactive chart or a map or a table or whatever. A story is one or more visualizations sequenced together in an interactive presentation to create something with a narrative, and we'll come back to that in a minute. So let's click on New Visualization. That takes us to the template chooser. Now, the template chooser has a bunch of different views, but generally you'll be staying on the featured tab there. And as we scroll down, we'll see that there are lots of different types of templates in Flourish for lots of different types of graphics. Some of these you'll recognize from the examples page, and other ones will look less familiar. So let's just quickly take stock of the different kinds of things that are in here. So there are lots of charts, and some of these charts are combined in a single template. That's how we can allow these kind of animations between different types of chart. So here's one of the examples I showed earlier. Some of them are charts which add a little bit of extra magic, such as the bar chart race we looked at before, or something like this, the line chart race, where you can animate a bunch of competitors through time to see how they compare in terms of ranks or the raw scores in the data. There are also charts like flow diagrams, for example, chord diagrams, which have beautiful gradient shading, and Sankey diagrams, which enable you to show flows between different points in time, for example. And then you can also see things like our table template, which makes it possible to make interactive, mobile-friendly tables, which incorporate mini charts that are just automatically made from the numbers in the raw data. And then you've got all the maps and the advanced data explorers, like the survey visualization that I showed you before, parliament charts, sports templates for showing particular lineup. So there's a wide range of different visualization types. Some of them are more special purpose, and some of them are very generic. So let's have a look at the Flourish visualization editor. If I click on one of these templates, let's say I go with the packed circle starting point, which is part of the hierarchy template, then we can have a look at the different parts of the editor. So the first part over on the left here is the preview of the graphic itself. So this is what we'll ultimately publish or use. You can grab the side of this and resize it, which is handy for seeing how this is going to scale on different device sizes. You can also jump to standard sizes at the top here, or specify in pixels how big you want it. Over on the right, you've got the template settings. So these settings let you configure the view of the visualization. That might be sometimes changing the graphical style completely, like these different ways of presenting this same data here. But generally, these are ways to configure visual aspects of the graphics, such as the color scheme, such as the orientation of the labels, and things that you'll find cutting across all the templates, such as how to change the font, or how to put in a title, subtitle, footer, source, so on. So that's the settings over on the right, and generally these are designed to be as easy to use as possible. So you can usually work out what each setting does just by having a look at it. You can hover over the little question mark if something isn't self-explanatory enough. The third part of the editor is the data area. So if you click on the data tab up here, you can see that this particular template has a single data sheet. Some templates might use more than one, which contains the values that are currently being plotted. So you can see here that each row is a film, and each column is some attribute about that particular movie, so the genre, the studio, and the worldwide gross, so on. We can replace that with our own data simply by importing a CSV in a compatible format. So you generally want to look at the sample data, make sure your data is broadly of the same structure, and then you just import it here. You can also drag data files into this area, or you can indeed type directly into here. So if I was to make an edit to this data here, if you keep an eye on this little preview down the bottom, if I change one of these to be a much bigger number, then the graphic would immediately animate to its new state to reflect the change to the data. And that becomes important later as we start to do animated storytelling. But I'll undo that because I typed in a random number there. So the final part of the editor is this column selection panel. So this is where you tell Flourish which columns are being used for which elements in the data. So in this particular template, which takes individual data points and then groups them and nests them inside these circles, you can see that what we're doing is setting column C, studio, then column B, genre, and then column A for the individual movie. And that's creating the data structure that's represented in this graphic. So if I change that to be, the studio first, the genre first, then the studio, then the graphic would look completely different. And then we're using column G here for the worldwide gross. Obviously, if we had different columns like US gross or European gross, and you just change that column there to determine which values are being used in the graphic. So that's really all there is to it. Up at the top are the kind of project level settings. So I can give this a name. Let's say I call this movie graphic. I can see whether this is private or publicly visible. I can duplicate it, delete it, so on. And over here, once I'm happy with my graphic, I can then export it or use it as the basis of a story. So once you're happy with your graphic, then there's lots of different things you can do. If you want to embed it on a website, then you can simply hit this button here, publish to share or embed. That will publish it publicly, embed it on a Flourish page, and also give you an embed code where you can embed it directly in your own website with quite a lot of options around responsiveness and so on. If you wanted to embed it on your site but avoid it being pulled in directly from Flourish, then we could unpublish it here, and instead we could, if you're an enterprise customer, you could download it as HTML, which would give you all the same files, but in a format where you can put it on your own server and embed it from there. If you just wanted to drop this into a PowerPoint or something else, then probably the easiest way to do that is just to screenshot this graphic, and I can then put that in any kind of document. But you can also, in the case of a vector graphic like this one, you could download this as an editable SVG, ready to be edited in Illustrator or some other kind of tool. So lots of different things you can do. If you're a business customer, you can also share privately with colleagues, clients, and so on, without the need for them to have a Flourish login. So the way that works is you would hit publish to embed, but you'd password protect that page. So if I gave this a secret password, published it online, then that has a URL that anyone can access without a login, but the contents is encrypted, so no one can access that without having the password. The other thing you can do with a Flourish visualization, rather than seeing this as the endpoint, is to use it as the basis of a story. Now, you can create a new story and import a visualization, or you can just click here to open the current visualization in a new story. You can see that the Flourish story editor, which we're now in, looks quite different. The settings have gone, the data area is gone. Instead, we're focused on something that looks a little bit more like a PowerPoint editor with slides down the left and the current slide previewed in the middle. Now, the thing that's unique about the Flourish story editor is that when you make some kind of change to the graphic here, for example, if I was to click in, that view change is now saved inside my slide. So if, for example, I wanted to create a Flourish story that started with this whole view, and I could give some annotation at the top if I wanted. So, you know, here are 2000 movies grouped by genre and studio. I could then duplicate that slide, change the state. So let's say we're going to focus in on Disney, which is the biggest single studio here. And we could say Disney is the largest studio overall. Now, when we move between these slides, we'll get whatever animation this template does on its change of state. So we could quickly create quite a rich story. Maybe we want to zoom all the way into, you know, independent romance. Here's a more zoomed in view. So obviously I'm just typing pretty random text in here just to give you the idea. And then let's go back to the top level view at the end. So you can see in just a few moments now we've made a rich interactive story which we could embed directly, and we've got all the same publishing options here. You could download and embed, but you could also use as the basis of a presentation. So if I was to click full screen here, we're now in a mode where I can just click next on my toolbar to guide the audience through this graphic with animations. Now, what kind of effect you're going to get depends very much on the graphic that you've made. So this is a zoomable circle diagram, so you're basically zooming around circles. Let's call this circle story. Whereas if, for example, you were to make a 3D region map, then the views that you'd get as you move between the different slides would be more like a three-dimensional camera pan around a map of, in this case, US counties. So you can create all kinds of cool things with Flourish stories, and you can also focus in on different filters and that kind of thing to just highlight the audience on a particular subset of some data. And once you're done, you can then put it on a big screen, publish it, embed it, or even create a video of this and put it on social media. So that's a really simple thing to do. You can use any standard software for screen recording, such as QuickTime on a Mac, which is built in. You just screen record the relevant area, create that video, and then you can put that on social or turn it into a GIF, etc. So hopefully that quick demo gave you a sense of what Flourish is, what you can use it for, and how easy it is to use. We'd love to answer any more detailed questions you have, so please get in touch at flourish.studio.